But right now, I want to talk to an investigative reporter who is just an extraordinary man who has been hugely successful. He is a man of detail. He spent 3 years putting this book together that we're going to talk about briefly now. It's called Cuckoo Land. And it's very, very important. We were talking about democracy earlier. This is about where the rich own the truth. His name is Tom Burgess, and I'm delighted to say he's joined me in the studio. Tom, first of all, how did you come across the story that became Cuckoo Land?
It's very nice to be here, Carol. It started when I found out 3 years ago, as you say, about a legal dispute that was taking place in secret. Now, for 20-odd years, I've worked mainly as a foreign correspondent, right? So I started in Latin America and then a long time in Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa. And then more recently, I've been going to places in the former Soviet Union, Russia, Ukraine, and so on. And often covering corruption.
Yeah.
Involving dictators, involving big Western multinational oil companies and so on. And then,
so you see the patterns of behaviour there then, I guess.
There are patterns of behaviour all over the world, absolutely. Yep. And then came the pandemic.
Yeah.
And we all stopped going anywhere. I was at home with a small kid. What I was doing with some of my time was being sued by a company owned by some oligarchs who objected to my last book, Kleptopia, about the rise of dirty money and kleptocrats. Kleptopia, that book was. And in the middle of that, I heard about another case. Mine was going on in the High Court, but this other case was going on completely in secret. And what had happened was that a rich man, his name was Mohammed Amersi, who had given an awful lot of money to the Conservative Party, he had hired one of the most fearsome law firms in London, and they were writing lots of letters and threatening legal action against a woman called Charlotte Leslie. Now, she used to be a Conservative MP, and what they were objecting to was some memos she'd written in which she'd raised questions about where Mr. Amersi's money came from, among other things. He said this was defamatory, this was blackening his good name. And I wondered, why is this response so aggressive? What is this man's past, who's now, to whom no door in the land is closed these days? The Prince Charles then was prime ministers, ministers, and so on. And that's the thread I started to follow for 3 years that's ended up with this book.
I mean, it's fascinating. I think it might well end up as a movie. You did ask the rich donor, Conservative Party donor, about what you'd found. Tell us about that, because that's a fascinating encounter in itself.
Yeah, memorable.
Yes.
It really was, and it's in the book. So those 3 years took me back to some of those places I'd gone to before. Some of the most corrupt dictatorships. Couldn't get back into Russia because the war had started by then, but I followed threads that led to Putin's St. Petersburg. There were other business deals in the communications industry, Russia, but also Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, violent, corrupt dictatorships. Nepal, run by a corrupt cabal of leaders there. Now, Mohammed Amersi says always that everything he did was completely legit. There's not a dirty dollar in his fortune, that he's a respected businessman and philanthropist, and that is his position. I wanted to hear his position, so when I was preparing the book, I got in touch with him. I'd already been in touch with him a few times, and I said, look, I've been looking at these many years of business deals and your transformation into a big philanthropist. Can we talk about it? Can I ask you questions? This is good journalism, right? You go and say, look, this is what I think I've understood. Am I wrong? So, about 8-9 months ago, I went to the offices of Carter Ruck. Now, I imagine you've heard of them, Carol, and I've heard of them. But yeah. I suspect many of your listeners, well informed though they no doubt are, might not have heard of Carter Ruck, even though they have an immense influence over what we get to know and what we don't get to know, what goes into our papers.
It's a law firm, is it not?
A law firm,
yeah.
Right in the middle of the city. Reputation management law firm, they're known as, and they're extremely good at managing their often very, very wealthy clients' reputations and deciding and influencing what goes in the papers and what doesn't. So over I go, and it's me and Mohammed Amersi in a room at Carter Ruck, and he proceeds to spend the day describing me and my work in terms that I fear, I'm just going to look at your producer, I fear I can't actually say on air,
Okay,
but you're
don't.
welcome.
No,
it's
don't.
it's a disparate, let's say, a disparaging view of me and my work, and an alternative version of the facts that I'd found. And if you want to read those in their full colour, they're in the book.
I could talk to you for hours, and I'm sure I will at some other point, Tom. But obviously, Cuckoo Land is now published. It was published on Thursday to incredible reviews across some very serious papers. So congratulations on that.
That's very
you
heartening,
haven't
thank
been
you.
sued, so whatever is in here.
Well, we'll see.
Well,
shall
we'll see. Okay, fair enough. But I want to ask, because we often hear about Tufton Street, and we often hear about think tanks that have dark money, as it's called, backing them. We don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people who appear on various programmes who say they're from, this think tank or that think tank, but we don't know who funds them. So is this just the story of one rich man, or is this about something bigger?
It's something much bigger, and I think it's something that a lot of us are grappling with in different ways. And I'd put it like this. The question is, and it's an alarming one, if you are rich enough today, if you are rich enough, can you choose what you want reality to be and impose that reality on the world by force of wealth and fear? For maybe 200 years, this is where the book ends up, for maybe 200 years, information has been getting freer, more democratic.
Absolutely.
The truth is something collective. Scientists, journalists, campaigning MPs, voices like yourself on the radio. We can all contest equally to get to the truth. But what if the truth is now available to buy?
Which to some degree it is. We know that.
I think that problem is getting worse and worse and worse. I think part of it is that the big question of our time is dirty money and corruption and the rise of these kleptocrats, right? Those who rule through corruption, Putin at their head. Yeah. This wave of corrupt power has arrived in Europe. I was just a few months ago in Ukraine on the front. That corrupt power is raining down hell on Ukrainians, right? This is the huge question of our time, and the rich and powerful have become incredibly good at censoring that. It's very hard to discuss that in the press, and it couldn't be more pressing.
Tom, thank you so much for all of the work that you've done and for coming in. Tom Burgess, thank